The time has come. The most anticipated show of the year has finally arrived. Praise be to the Seven. The premiere episode of House of the Dragon has just landed, and we're here to bring you reaction and expert commentary on all the political intrigue, family feuds, and fiery action. Welcome to Dragoncast. I'm Jamie East, and joining me this week to dissect the House of the Dragon premiere, like one of Kai Byrne's science projects, are the diamond ring on the hand of the king. I think that's better than the pinky finger, Chris. We'll keep working on it. Chris Mandle.
Hello.
And this week's special guest, journalist, editor and author, Terri White.
Hiya.
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 Hiya. Hi, everybody. So, at flipping last, it feels like one hell of a build-up, but 2 a.m. this morning, House of the Dragon was unleashed on the world. The premiere, what were your initial reactions? Terri, give us your first, what were your feelings when you were watching it?
Well, so I wouldn't say cynical. I always have this visceral reaction to these massively hyped shows. It's why I actually took forever to watch actual Game of Thrones until I was forced to watch it for work, because I just thought, this is like Harry Potter all over again. Nobody's going to strong-arm me into watching a stupid, nonsensical fantasy world made-up thing. And then obviously I watched Game of Thrones and thought, what have I been doing with my life? But so I was a little bit, a prequel, just focusing on obviously one family. Is this going to have the same intrigue and dynamics and drama? And this first episode, I'm just going to put it right out there from the get-go. Awesome. Yes. Amazing. We'll get into it in huge amounts of detail, but let me tell you, correcting things, Game of Thrones took years to correct, just SFX, character development, the way it treats women. I mean, they got so much right in this first episode that I think it just bodes incredibly well for the entire series.
There you go. That was one hell of a first reaction. Chris, what about you?
The first reaction was just this sense of relief. Like, they've done it. Like, it looks great. The characters seem really interesting and different than the characters on Game of Thrones. And I remember when that first episode ended, I just had this big exhale and I was like, yeah, they've done it. This is it. I'm in. And I was like Terri, I was quite cynical at first. Throughout the whole rollout, I just thought, oh, no, it's not going to work. And obviously the jury's still out on that. There's loads of episodes to go. But as soon as Rhaenyra turns to the camera when she's in her sort of like, she's been she's been announced as the new heir, she sort of turns, it just locks into place, and I just thought, yeah, this is going to be absolutely brilliant.
It felt fresh and it had a lot of depth to it straight away, and it felt familiar as well. It was like, it was the world we feel like we've been in before, but seen from a completely new perspective. I mean, pilot episodes, not a pilot, but first episodes of whole new things are extremely difficult to get right, because there's usually just so much exposition to get through. And actually, this opened up with something that I don't think we've ever had in Thrones Land before, which was a voiceover, and a bit of narrative, just setting the scene. One of the main things about Game of Thrones is it shows, it doesn't tell, but I guess it kind of had to, for all those people going, right, where's Daenerys, where's Jon Snow? Did we I think it's handled quite well. Got it all out of the way quickly. I enjoyed that a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I normally hate that, right? And exposition, I think, is really difficult, especially in a fantasy world like this, set, 100 and however many years, 172 years before Daenerys is even born. So, and what they had to do was make it easy to navigate if you are a massive Thrones fan, or if you'd never seen it. And I think they handled it perfectly. There's something quite intoxicating about this voiceover. And I just thought, do you know what? That heavy lifting had to be done, but it was done as gracefully and with as little much of clumsiness as possible. And I think anybody watching that will understand exactly where they are. And then off we go with, as you say, the showing no more telling. And,
I mean, there was so much to cram in. I mean, Miguel and Ryan, the showrunners, everyone knew what a tough job they had, and the responsibility on their shoulders and the pressure must have been pretty great. I think they did a really good job of introducing just an entirely new cast, entirely new characters. And I think the only thing that's confused a lot of people, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there were still people going into the first episode that had no idea that there were two actors playing both Alicent and Rhaenyra. I think that was still quite confusing from the trailer, I think, because the casting was so good, they actually still look really, really similar. So I think that took a bit of going. But what were the key moments that stood out for you, Chris?
I mean, there's the main thing is that we had, compared to the Game of Thrones premiere, compared to a lot of first episodes, we had a really brutal death. We had 2 deaths of key members of the Targaryen house, which is, I sort of knew the bare bones of this story, but I didn't expect that. That was a big thing which we should probably jump into. There was obviously the tournament. There's Prince Daemon, played by Matt Smith, who seems like had a real focal part of this episode with his sort of massacre across the city. And I think just the sense that there is a lot of unease in this fairly harmonious family. There's been a period of relative peace in Westeros, and the more we spent time with this family, the more we realised there's a lot of wounded people. There's a lot of wounded pride, and it's not going to take much for this whole thing to kick off. That was the sort of... It's
very much like a normal family Christmas on, say, 28th of December. That's the kind of emotional state that everyone seems to be in. It's like...
Reminded me a lot of the Mandle family Christmases. There's a lot of violence, a lot of swearing.
Let's skip ahead just a little bit, because I think one of the most memorable scenes was the death/birth scene. It was pretty full on for even in Game of Thrones, by Game of Thrones standards. This is a series and a world that has occasionally, more often than not, been criticised for its portrayal of women, its use of unnecessary sex and violence, particularly towards women. I can't see how else they could have made that scene. Terry, what did you think to it? How do you think they handled that?
I thought they handled it brilliantly, and I've already seen a bit of a backlash saying, this is gratuitous violence against women, it's childbirth, but really in essence it's no different than them being raped and murdered before. I watched the first episode of the first season of Game of Thrones this week, which essentially, Daenerys is married off and forced into sex with her new husband. And the way that's treated, very titillating, very pornified. In the end, the narrative has it she takes control of the sex, and just a completely unrealistic way that really diminished the kind of violence she was enduring. And I found that really made me queasy. This, like the first naked body part you see belongs to a man. It belongs to a rapist who is then castrated. I mean, if we're going to talk about statements of intent about how they're going to treat men and women in this, there is sex, but why shouldn't there be? I think what we're not seeing is loads of rape, which is being used for either plot or titillation, basically. But this childbirth scene, and a lot of women have responded negatively to this childbirth scene. I have given birth to a child by cesarean, and let me tell you, it's one of the most realistic, I know it's obviously thousands of years ago, one of the most realistic depictions. And if you think, those showrunners did a fucking fantastic job, because they juxtaposed the jousting contest with childbirth, and there's actually a line where she said, the child bed is our battlefield. And what becomes clear is, in this world, in this patriarchal world, these men, violence is sport. They go in armoured up, they go in protected, and for them it's all part of a day's laugh, of a day's kind of socialising. But for women, our battlefield is when we bring babies into the world, and we go in raw and vulnerable and stripped bare and unprotected. And more often than not, our lives are laid on the line, not by us, but by the men making the decisions for us. So it's decided that the baby should be saved at her expense. And that's a very brutal but realistic scene. And it's heartbreaking on so many levels, and it is graphic. But you know what? Most TV shows or films, what happens is they go into labour and they cut away and they come back, and there's a woman with a light dab on, she's sweating slightly, holding a child. Or the baby and the mother dies and they've got a sheet over their heads. Yeah. This refused to cut away. There was a use of score to soften some of the edges. So there was screaming you couldn't hear and a very emotive score. but it shows the reality of what it does to a woman's body, how it breaks us, how, you know, we tear apart in our kind of job to continue the population. And I thought it was, you know, incredibly brave, really radical, and I think it absolutely was necessary. It's one of my, weirdly, impossible to watch, one of my favourite scenes in the entire thing. I think there's so much power in it. I think it's incredible.
And also, it's steeped in realism, you know. Show me any childbirth that isn't bloody and mucousy and screaming and sweaty and agony, and actually, you know, the decision that Viserys had to make is one that is made in real life to this day. And you know,
absolutely, it's still primitive, it's still brutal.
And you're right, you know, we've come a long way since Daenerys discovering cowgirl was a way to a man's heart. You know? Chris, what was your takeaway from that? I mean, it was an eye waterer, but a vital plot point.
Yeah, I mean, when I watched it, I kept thinking they're not gonna. How much are they gonna show of this? Because I thought they would cut away, and you know, this is a show that often, you know, women do die off screen, or they sort of, it's like, oh, you know, we've written her out kind of quite disrespectfully. And I thought the way they faced it head on was great. I couldn't believe every time there was an incision, every time we saw more belly, more blood, I kept thinking, I cannot believe they're showing this 35 minutes into the first episode. This is like nothing they've done before. So I really admired it. I thought, yeah, it was just done really, really smartly. I thought it was great, actually. I mean, I was interested in when I first saw it. I thought, I wonder what the backlash is going to be. I wonder what people are going to say. And of course, I want to listen to people who have more experience in childbirth than me when it comes to what this does well and what it doesn't do well. But I thought it was great, and I thought it wasn't gratuitous. You know, Viserys making that decision sets everything that is about to happen into motion, for good or bad. And so it's really, really important. I thought it was just outstanding, really. And
the other side of House of the Dragon, the one that were the things that we're all waiting to see were the dragons. You know, we had 3 dragons in Game of Thrones, and now we've got 17. I think it's safe to say that CGI has moved on, even in the past 3 years. You know, I spoke to Miguel Sapochnik last week about it, and they've utilised the same kind of tech that Disney have utilised for kind of Mandalorian and Obi-Wan, the kind of huge digital 360-degree screens. And he said that whilst it's brilliant, they're actually really difficult to film on, because you can only move the camera like a few inches before it completely throws it. It's got to be the field of vision is so limited with them. But the dragons looked cool. You know, they felt like proper characters rather than just kind of, you were looking at them in Thrones and you just knew that someone was looking at a tennis ball in a sock or something like that. These felt good, right, Terry?
Yeah, there was nothing distinguishing about the 3 in Game of Thrones either. They looked the same. They were slightly different colours. They sounded the same. These ones feel, I mean, there's 2 in this episode, right? There's Rhaenyra's and Daemon's. They look different physically. One of them's got like a really long neck. One of them's got like wings on its back legs. They seem very different, and I think they already seem to have done a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you always used to spot it, right? No matter how great the aerial scenes became, whenever you had a character riding a dragon, it was like green screen time. And I think that's the most difficult bit. That was always the giveaway. And I mean, God, what are they saying? 20 million an episode spent on VFX. I don't know if you could see all 20 million, but it's come on so incredibly far. And as you were saying, Chris, they're characters in their own right, and they're used, I think you said casually, which I thought was really interesting. They're not, it's not always battle pitch. They're part of the fabric, part of the family. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. The detail, as usual, is just incredible.
And, despite the grand scale of the dragons and the sets and the locations and how everything looks, I think it's safe to say that we aren't in for this sprawling kind of worldwide tale where there's different houses doing different things, and there's different, in Thrones we had stuff going on in Dawn and Essos and Winterfell, and this is very much focusing on it's a family, it's almost a character-driven drama. And what do we make of the family? We've got Viserys, we've got Rhaenyra, we've got Otto and Alicent, we've got Rhaenys, we've got all of these, and Daemon, of course, who we'll come on and talk to in a minute. There's a great mixture of all of the different ingredients for what we know is going to be some form of civil war, isn't there? None of them are particularly happy with their lot, I don't think, are they?
No, and I'll tell you what, because I was worried about that, about when you zero in so sharply, do kind of some of the bigger picture stuff, does the epicness almost get lost? I think it's worked out really well, because what you're describing is the way that all of those battles would normally rage between families is raging within one family. And what that enables you to do actually is to get further and further under those skins, under those allegiances, those moments of disloyalty. So I feel like they've done such a good job of setting these characters in the first episode, so you understand where the tensions are. You understand exactly what might actually blow up over the next few episodes. And the cast is legendary. I mean, I would have mentioned Millie Alcock, whose name I want to walk down the street telling everybody to get to the television and watch her. I cannot remember being so thrilled by a young actor's performance. Absolutely incredible. She's electric, and we know that obviously there's another actress for the older scenes, and I'm already in mourning that she may leave my telly. There's something so magnetic about her, and and let's be honest about Matt Smith. Yeah, hammy as hell, and I absolutely love it. He's having the time of his life. It is top drawer, like, across the entire family, and I think they've done that superbly, both kind of dramatically but also just in those individual performances. They're so brilliant.
He there was an element of Captain Flashheart about Matt Smith, but I mean, Millie Alcock, she's got such a distinctive look that it's almost alien-like. Those eyes, she does feel otherworldly. And actually, when you see her stood next to her older counterpart, it's uncanny. The casting is uncanny. So much so that, as I said, I think people were confused in the trailer that they were seeing two actresses, and yet only could see one on screen. I think it was fantastic. Let's talk about Matt Smith though, because it does feel, I think everybody has their suspicions about Viserys, which we'll come on to shortly. With that in mind, it does feel like Daemon is going to be the main protagonist in this. Although, having spoken to Matt Smith, he is playing him as a good guy. He's saying Daemon is fine. He spins the coin in the air. There is every Targaryen's life is a coin spinning in the air with greatness on one side and madness on the other, and his is still spinning. It's still in the air. It hasn't landed yet. So he's playing him straight down the middle, as if he's a noble character. Chris, what did you think to Matt Smith?
Yeah, I kind of agree with him, actually, after watching that first episode. There's a scene with him and Viserys. Viserys is on the throne. They're having a very, very sort of impassioned conversation about Daemon's conduct. Obviously, he sort of goes through the city and sort of slaughters like loads of people, and he says he's doing it to protect everyone else in the city, and also to sort of spread a message that they're not to be messed with as a family and as a city. But he says, we have got each other. That's all we've got. I'm your blood. I will basically do the things that you're too cowardly to do, and you need to run this place you need to run this whole operation with a bit more aggression. I think he is. He's obviously like doing unspeakable things, but everybody in Westeros who is in power does unspeakable things. Most of them just try and convince themselves that they're the good guys. I don't think he's any different. I think he's very interesting. And I think Matt Smith does a really good job of making him seem, kind of weaselly and sort of a bit snaky, but also there was periods where he was genuinely wounded by what was happening. And I thought his relationship with Rhaenyra was also like really quite special. They speak together in High Valyrian, mainly so a lot of the people in the court won't be able to overhear them. And I think there's a really interesting sort of special relationship between uncle and niece. My only concern is because we do know the Targaryens love to fuck their own family. I'm worried for her that there's going to be some disgusting union. But the other thing I thought, just really quickly, is he seemed a bit keen on Alicent Hightower as well. She gave him a favour at the tournament, which is the sort of Westeros equivalent of sliding into someone's DMs. So I don't know where these two women are going to be in relation to this character, but I think that could be an interesting bit of discord.
About Viserys a little bit, because Paddy, as ever, as if we ever doubted him, played him to an absolute T, kind of trod that fine line between kind of compassion and steeliness. But is it safe to say at this stage that it ain't looking good for him? You know, I'm no scab meister, but if you've got a weeping sore that won't go away on your back, you know, that's screaming pox to me. Anyone else agree?
Yeah, he seems ill. He seems susceptible to illness, which is sort of, you know, just not a very attractive quality in a ruler. But I think it's hard to play a character who is quite soft, especially for someone like Paddy Considine. And I think he has to get across that this guy is just a little bit like wobbly and a little bit inept and is a bit of a coward and has been wanting this son to come along so that he can get off the throne sooner rather than later, because he doesn't seem to enjoy it. But yeah, we saw that sort of infected cut on his back. They sort of implied it was from sitting on the throne too long, which is like, you know, irony alert, or, you know,
well, here's
foreshadowing.
My question. Sorry to interrupt on
but
that,
I also
because is this where they've merged a story from a previous king? Because I believe there was a previous king who was said to have been killed by the throne. Like, actually, kind of, it was Maegor the Cruel. Legend has it in the books that he was actually killed by the throne in some kind of weird smoke baby, Red Witch kind of way. And we know there was a scene where Viserys, so you're right, the sore on the back was rumoured to be caused by the throne. And then we saw he nicked his little pinky, which just the camera just lingered on that for maybe half a second, long enough for me to think I need to pay attention to that. Did anyone else catch that?
Yeah, and to your point, the show, there's been things in the books, in the original series, the Song of Ice and Fire books, that, you know, the throne will cut you if you don't sit on it right, if you're not the right fit. It's this sort of fate of, like, you know, you will get hurt. And I think on a broader thing, like, it is made of all the swords of your enemies, and it is not designed to be comfortable. And I think him frequently, I mean, we saw Daemon sitting on it in this episode, and he was fine. And I do think there is a lot that they're already planting these seeds to suggest that he's just not a particularly good fit. And also, very quickly, he doesn't have a dragon. That big skull in the Red Keep was his old dragon. And I think a Targaryen king without a dragon is another way of them to just project that, like, he is without his sort of superego, or he's without his strongest weapon. And that
do we know what happened to his dragon? Have we been told that in the show?
I mean, I don't think so. Just as a heads up for people listening, so I have seen a few. We're only here to talk about episode 1. I can't remember
where there's a conversation
where it comes up or when it comes up, but I can't, because I've had to watch it in such a condensed period. What I would say though is that I think it does get addressed, in that it was like that big one that big skull when he says
Balerion the Dread. Now,
yes. Yeah, and the dragons do sort of choose. They choose their.
A bit like the wands in John Hurt's Shop of Harry Potter.
A little bit, yeah.
More fire.
Yeah.
Terry, there were quite a, you know, the dragon in the room. A lot of fans of Thrones were left quite jaded at the end of season 8. We're not going to get into that again. Goodness knows, there's enough been said about that. Said they were finished with Westeros, weren't going to watch the show, which is petty and stupid, and they'd be foolish to. Do you think that this has done enough to win them back, or at least show them that actually don't give up on Westeros just yet.
I think it's opened the door, hasn't it? And look, I always think when people react that strongly, it's because they really fucking care. And we've all had those shows where we're so let down by either a finale or a final season that it feels personal. We swear off it. We make little dolls to stick pins in. All of those things happen, and it's fine. But you hope that they're over it, and I think those changes that they have made, I think they've done an incredible job of making it feel distinct, different, its own thing. Really feels like it's evolved, but also you understand where you are, and if that is a world you love, then I think I absolutely can't see people really firmly standing by that. And I think on performances alone, on cast alone, the writing still crackles. You know, there's a line where she says, take a bath, you stink of dragon. Like, all of those, you know, dragony touches that make you know where you are, all of those little flourishes are in there, so it feels familiar enough. But I honestly feel like it's leaps and bounds on, and I think any GOT fan is just gonna give it a go for the first episode, and I think you'll be sucked right in. Yeah,
I thought the script was fantastic. One of my favourite lines is someone called Danny Gone Bad, presumably in relation to Daenerys rather than Danny Baker or anyone like that. Said, "I want to fly with you on dragonback, see the great wonders across the narrow sea, and eat only cake."
Cake, yeah. And that's like, you know, the way, again, that was Millie Alcock, and they gave her some absolutely gorgeous lines that just spoke to her desire for freedom and power, and the sense of how constrained she is as a woman, and all of these things that I think can sometimes be played a little bit heavy-handed or a little bit hackneyed. They felt fresh and exciting, and the script did crackle. You knew exactly where you were. It was funny in parts, and incredibly tragic. You know, the moment in which Sean Brooke is held down so that they can rescue I mean, that moment alone, when she looks at her husband and says, "Please no," and she realizes, that moment alone, I mean, I was in tears at that moment. It's so brilliantly done. The nuance in this is incredible, and I often think that these worlds don't get enough credit for the nuance in the storytelling and the power in the detail of the storytelling, and it's up there. That moment is up there with any drama we've seen, any prestige drama we've seen on telly this year.
And we will continue this right after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back. This is episode 2 of Dragoncast, home of House of the Dragon. I'm Jamie East, and I'm with Chris Mandle and Terri White. Now, Terri, we couldn't get you on. We were talking about scripting and creating worlds, and you are in the thick of what must be a mental period of your life. Billie Piper is you. Tell the listeners a little bit about that.
So I wrote a memoir which came out in 2020 about my time in a locked psychiatric ward in New York, and essentially the events of my childhood that had led me there. And I was lucky enough for it to be optioned by Bad Wolf, who obviously do Discovery of Witches, His Dark Materials, Industry, I Hate Susie.
Officially not a shit production company. Yeah.
Officially the best. And Billie Piper has signed on to star as me and to be an exec producer. And I'm writing the script, and I'm an exec producer as well. So we're in development at the moment.
That's amazing.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's incredibly mental.
So is it in
terrifying.
development at the moment? Is it filming?
Yes, it's in development, and hopefully have more news on that soon.
You weren't responsible for Billie being photographed with Christopher Eccleston the other day, then? Was that your dope?
Oh no, now it's doing me. Oh God, don't! Oh, wouldn't that be amazing? I love. Oh, don't Christopher Eccleston! Don't give me ideas now.
That's what you need to do.
Well. The problem is there are only bad men in my book, so like, would it be weird? Would I besmirch his reputation to have him play my violent dad?
Well, let Reddit be the judge of that. Now, we talked about the throne and the swords on the throne, about how they're injuring Viserys. One of my favourite little kind of insights was we learnt of a new sword, and as anyone knows, in the land of Westeros, if you've got a sword, it's got to have a slightly weird name to it. We had a widow's wail. That was Joffrey's, that was forged from Longclaw, which was Ned Stark's, and it was kind of melted down and turned into, I think Widow's Wail was one, an Oathkeeper, I think, was the other one that Brienne of Tarth ended up having. There was Ice, there was Dark Sister, Lightbringer, Needle, which is tattooed on my arm. There you go. There's Needle there. And we got a glimpse of Daemon Targaryen's sword, which was called Dark Sister. So we heard Daemon Targaryen mention Dark Sister a couple of times. So I thought it was probably about time that we delved into a bit of a Dragoncast wisdom and see what we know about the mysterious Dark Sister. Dark Sister was the Valyrian steel sword wielded by Aegon the Conqueror's sister wife Visenya, who was a skilled warrior who trained alongside her brother since childhood. King Aegon once proclaimed that he felt really well protected by his guards. There was nothing to kind of help him with. But in a split second, Visenya drew Dark Sister and with lightning speed cut the cheek of the king. Before the guards could even react, obviously. This led to Aegon entrusting Visenya to establish what we now know as the King's Guard. The ancient sword passed through the generations to Jaehaerys, the fourth Targaryen king to rule Westeros. Jaehaerys would eventually bestow the blade to his grandson Daemon Targaryen in recognition of his prowess in battle. Dark Sister was lost to the ages in the Blackfyre Rebellion, an affair that takes place long after the events of House of the Dragon. But as for what happens to this historic blade between now and then, we might well find out. We didn't see any other swords. Did we see Viserys' sword? I'm not sure we did. I don't think we did.
We did. I don't know about Viserys' sword, but there was a Valyrian steel dagger in this episode that is the one, I think.
Yeah, the cat's paw dagger. So and there was and one of my favourite scenes in this episode, and mainly I guess it was because it had a little emotional link to Thrones, was where he was speaking to Rhaenyra. I think it was in front of the skull of the dragon, wasn't it? And told her of the prophecy or the dream that is handed down by the kings of Targaryen, which is essentially the dream of foreshadowing the Night King's arrival. And the cat's paw dagger, as he was telling Rhaenyra, that was in his pocket, and as we know, that's the dagger that ends up killing the Night's King. Arya uses that dagger. It's also the dagger that kind of kickstarts the whole hellfire of season 1 of Game of Thrones, because it's the dagger that I think Littlefinger had that was used to kill. Remind me, was it? There was a. It was thought. It was
used to. Someone tried to kill Bran when he was in his coma, and Littlefinger told Cat Stark that it belonged to Tyrion, which it was a lie. And that caused her to arrest him, and that caused the Lannisters to declare war, and that caused everything, and the whole thing was done on a complete misunderstanding.
Let's move on to a few characters that were on the periphery that I guess are gonna kind of come into it. One of my favourite pairings was Steve Toussaint and Eve Best's kind of dead sexy kind of married couple of Corlys Velaryon and Rhaenys Targaryen. They just look badass together. He just looks fantastic, like a kind of swashbuckling Billy Ocean, and he I think is going to be quite a major player in the Game of the Thrones. You know, I think he feels as though he's got a lot of skin in the game. He doesn't need the money. He's one of the richest people. I think he's richer than the Targaryens themselves, but also is married to the queen that never was. What did you think to them, Terry? What was your take on them?
I loved their vibe. There were so many brilliant little shared looks, and he particularly holds his cards really close to his chest, and you know, I mean, the fact that she's called the Queen Who Never Was, day after day after day, it's like, all right, you're taking the piss. I know I was almost Queen and wasn't. You've actually called me the Queen Who Never Was. There is something, I find them fascinating. They're really compelling. They have really amazing chemistry, and clearly, you know, whether it's her being passed over for the throne because of her sex, something is brewing with those two, and I feel like I shouldn't be rooting for them, but I absolutely am.
I think so. Yeah, it's difficult to know who to root for at this early stage because You don't know who's going to be alive next week. You don't know who's going to be a baddie. You don't know what. One character that you kind of feel as though, they seem like a nice guy. They seem like a nice guy, which doesn't happen often in Game of Thrones land. Was Sir Criston Cole, who was the kind of the working class knight that appeared at the tourney and actually whipped Daemon's ass. What did you think to him, Chris? I mean, he looked very dashing and good looking. He looked very, you know how Tyrion looked in season 1 of Game of Thrones, where his hair was nicely done and he was very buff. It doesn't look fucked up enough yet. So I'm hoping that happens. But clearly a key figure.
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing a fellow handsome man on the screen. I relate to him so much, you know. I thought, that's sort of long flowing dark hair. Yeah, it looks like he could be in a Hugo Boss advert, and I love that for him. I thought he was really interesting because, you know, he's kind of from like a common-born house, and he's got himself some armor, beating the shit out of Daemon, and is suddenly everyone's like, wow, eligible bachelor. And it's kind of interesting how the men can sort of upwardly mobilize like that, whereas even Rhaenyra is like a princess, and they're all told like, you know, you can't really do anything because you're a woman. So I think it's a really interesting like juxtaposition. He seems, I don't really know, like he's kind of an armed guard. He's hot. I mean, I kind of don't really know much about him at this point, but yeah, it's good to have some more eligible bachelors that aren't like screaming psychopaths.
An armed guard and kind of hot. I mean, what more do you want, Chris?
He is free to use that on his IMDb. I think it's Fabian Frankel that.
He is a lovely lad. Lovely. And someone who, again, you know, getting glimpses of, they look like a possible ally, was Mysaria, who was the kind of shy to Daemon's Tyrion.
They had a weird dynamic because we see her engaged in the coital activities, and you think that's, you know, in Game of Thrones fashion, she's going to be a woman having sex with a very prominent male character. But there's a really interesting exchange where he's clearly upset, and the way she speaks to him and consoles him it immediately shifted my view. I was like, no, she has some power over him, and she's incredibly self-possessed. And I was like, she has the capacity to be absolutely on his level and kind of make some either incredible or incredibly dangerous duo.
Now, one of the best things about we're now kind of in full flow of episodes being released is that as soon as episode 1 finished, there was a teaser for episode 2, which I believe we're going to play out right now. Let's have a listen to it and see what we can make out. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, you will watch this with us as we delve into episode 2 of House of the Dragon.
The road ahead is uncertain, but the end is clear.
Against whom?
Whomever may dare to challenge us.
The threat of war looms. The gods have yet to make a man who lacks the patience for absolute power, Your Grace.
Wowzers. Okay. Season 1, episode 2 trailer of House of the Dragon. I think if episode 1 was an insular kind of retrospective navel gazing kind of look into a family on the brink of civil war, safe to say if asked to shit or get off the pot, everyone seems to have done a massive shit. And we've got dragons, we've got fire, and it opened with I think a great line in reference to the wider universe. We know we know what the end is, but the journey is going to be crazy. Any takeaways from that little glimpse there, Terry?
I mean, fucking loads of dragons. That made me really excited. And obviously Daemon's taken the decision really well in terms of no longer being a prince. He's clearly dealing with it in an absolutely sane and normal way. Well. Yeah, exactly. Only having the kids on a Saturday afternoon, are we? But yeah, and obviously the two girls are going to be pitted against each other, and all those grudges that have been being nursed are going to come. They're going to come to the surface. And I've just got a feeling that back wound is going nowhere good.
They hadn't invented Sudocrem back then. No.
They really hadn't.
Chris, any takeaways from that?
Well, the main thing is like the Alicent and Rhaenyra going and really like falling out. I mean, at the moment we don't quite know why that is, but we did see this in this first episode that she was advised to do the Westeros equivalent of taking a Barry White CD and a bottle of wine over to the king. So I can presume that that's the cause. Could be that she's hanging out with Daemon, but obviously we're going to.
If your best mate's been fucking your dad, it's a tough one to get over, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, I think there's no both-sidism to this debate about who's in the wrong, but it does sort of make it does feel like they're kind of getting on with it and getting to some of the really juicy stuff. Also, just seeing all the dragon fire raining down, it's just they're really
one little detail I thought was brilliant. I don't know, people watching or people listening, go and find it on YouTube. The map room, I think, which felt like it was in Dragonstone, but it may have been in King's Landing. It looked like it was alive. There was like lava in it. There were like actual flames on the top of it. I don't know whether that was like a dream sequence or something, but it looked absolutely crazy. And one thing that I did want to mention was just a big shout out to the art department of House of the Dragon for having to light all of those candles, because holy shit, someone somewhere has had a right nightmare lighting all of those.
Sponsored by Swan matches.
Those big long ones that they sell in Ponty gift shops. Yeah, Oliver Bonas specials.
Yeah. That's what I think. I do think is really cool is seeing like Dragonstone and like all these locations from Game of Thrones in a new light, because they're sort of slightly different, but they've changed in a way, but they haven't, if that makes sense. Like, and I think one of those scenes with one of the dragons where it sort of lands on the bridge, I mean, that looks like Dragonstone, like the sort of big walled fortress that obviously Daenerys was in towards the end of Game of Thrones. So yeah, it's just cool to see all that again, and it feels all that. We talked earlier about like how do we feel like Game of Thrones ended on a funny note, but like when you see all these locations anew, it's just like reinvigorates how exciting it is to be back, and it just feels so exciting. I can't wait to see like where it does go. I mean, we know that it's going to be a bit more limited in scope, but where it does go is going to be really
we've only got 6 days to wait until episode 2 of House of the Dragon is upon us. You can, of course, watch it on Sky Atlantic, Now TV. Hello to the 2 a.m. club. There is a secret 2 a.m. club. I think you can join the community on Twitter with Sky TV and Now if you're one of those people who cannot wait until 9 p.m. On Sky Atlantic. It's airs at 2 a.m. to simulcast with the States as well. Terri, where can people find out more about you and say a friendly hello?
I am on Twitter at Terri_White and Instagram at Terri L White. Not confusingly at all.
Chris, that pesky underscore still in your life?
Oh my God, I know. Yes, it is. I'm on Chris_Mandle on Twitter, Chris Mandle 1 on Instagram, and please do not approach me when I'm doing my big weekly shop. I don't like it.
Lovely stuff. Thanks so much for watching if you're on our YouTube channel, or for listening if you're listening via Spotify or Apple or Google or Acast or any number of those things. Do get in touch with any comments about the podcast or your thoughts on the show as well. Just email dragoncast@daftdoris.com, or just catch up with us on Twitter at dragoncast_pod, or just me at Jamie East. Thank you so much for joining me, Terri and Chris. We will see you next week for more Dragoncast. There will be a new episode of Dragoncast, home of House of the Dragon, every single week. Do us a favour, subscribe, like, leave us a comment, let us know what you think of the podcast. Follow us on Twitter at dragoncast.pod, or send us an email, dragoncast@daftdoris.com. Thanks very much.